Today I want to give you a breakdown of all of the players who are involved in making a real estate transaction happen from start to finish, and along the way I will elaborate on all of the roles of the people involved, and it will sort of explain the home buying process from start to finish as well. So we'll kind of kill two birds with one stone in this video. So the obvious person who's starting this transaction, who is the first one involved, is you. And you are either going to be the buyer or the seller, and there's really not much to say about that, but obviously I have to start from the beginning, and so the beginning starts with you. You've decided to buy or sell a property. Next, pretty much what everybody does is they call a real estate agent. If they are going to be selling the house, they look for a real estate agent to sell the house, and if they're buying, they call a real estate agent because they want to start looking at houses. On the buying side, let me just give you a quick disclaimer here. Actually, if you are the buyer, your first call should actually be to your bank or preferably a mortgage broker, because the first thing you're going to need to do is get pre-approved for a mortgage before you can ever buy a house, and most realtors aren't even going to show you any properties unless you have been pre-approved, because otherwise there's no proof that you can actually buy a house. So technically, if you're the buyer, your first call should be to a mortgage broker, and I recommend mortgage brokers over your local bank every single time because they have hundreds of different lenders available at their disposal that can actually craft the right lending program for you, particularly based on your income and your credit, and they're going to be almost guaranteed to get you the best deal. Whereas your bank, they're going to have a couple of different loan options and that's it, and it's almost always never the best deal, and on top of that, it almost never closes. So I know we're getting a little bit off track here, but I'm just telling you, if you're the buyer, call a mortgage broker first before you call a realtor. However, if you don't know any mortgage brokers, feel free to call the realtor first, and the realtor will be happy to recommend one to you most of the time. Back to the real estate agent. Obviously, the real estate agent is going to be involved in either helping you sell your house, and if you're on the buying side, they're going to be helping you find a house. So that one's pretty obvious too. The only thing I want to mention here on top of that is, guys, be loyal to your real estate agent, and if you're worried about picking the wrong one, interview a few of them before hiring them. Interview a few of them before you list to sell your house, and interview a few of them before you decide to just go with one that's going to help you find your house. It will go a long ways in trusting the person you're going to be working with, as well as making it easy for them to want to be loyal to you, and vice versa. And it's just going to be a better, smoother transaction if you do this, especially if the realtor knows you got their back and you're not going to bail and go make the transaction with another realtor. So now you have your real estate agent and you got an offer on your house and you're going to be selling the house, or you're putting an offer on the house and you found the one you want to buy. The next person that's going to be involved in the transaction for you is probably going to be a property inspector. The buyer is going to want to have an inspector come by and check out your property if you're the seller, and if you are the buyer should definitely hire a property inspector to go and inspect the home they're thinking of buying to uncover any potential hidden issues that might be present in the home, because you'd be surprised at the things that turn up, and spending a few $100s on the inspection is pretty much always worth it. It is optional, you don't have to do this, but I recommend you do it 100% of the time. The next person who may possibly be involved, whether you are the buyer or the seller, is an attorney, if you are choosing to hire one. It's optional to hire an attorney. You don't need to have an attorney in order to close a real estate transaction. And basically the only reason you would want to hire one is if you pretty much want to have like a hands-off experience and you don't even want to look at your own real estate contract, and you're willing to pay an attorney a couple $1,000s to look it over for you and make sure you're not getting screwed. But the reality is, you can look over your own contract and read it, and it's pretty easy for most people to understand. And in my own experience, working almost 12 years as a real estate agent here, I almost never have clients that use an attorney. It's very rare. Probably out of all the deals I've ever done, maybe 4 or 5 people have used an attorney this entire time. So it's not that common, and that just goes to show you that it's not really needed. Guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, make sure that you are subscribed, and you might as well just hit the like button while you're at it. And I'm going to be making a lot more videos like this one, so that way you will see all of my new videos in the future. Now the next entity you're going to be dealing with, and this only applies if you're going to be buying or selling a condo, and that would be the Condo Association. Or it could also apply if you live in like a housing community of townhouses and there's an HOA, because what's going to happen is if you're selling, then you need to give the HOA or the Condo Association notice that you're going to be selling. And if you're the buyer, you're going to have to fill out all of the condo paperwork before actually being able to move into the place, because usually they have to go through a type of approval process where they'll check your credit and your background and make sure that you can afford to buy the property and that you're not going to buy it today and go into foreclosure next month and stop paying your HOA dues, things like that. So that will be the next entity or group of people you're going to be dealing with in the transaction. And right around this same time, you're also going to be starting to deal with a title company, and usually the buyer or the seller chooses the title company. It's not both, it's usually one or the other, and whoever chooses the title company usually has to pay a couple extra fees at closing. So if you get the advantage of choosing the title company you want, the closing will be slightly more expensive for you, but we're talking a few $100. But anyways, the title company will be the next entity that you're going to be dealing with, and that's a very important role in the home buying process, because they will either be holding your deposit or your real estate agent and the brokerage will be holding the deposit. So that's one reason why they're important. But the other reason why they are important is because the title company is in charge of transferring the title to you as the new buyer, or transferring it away from you if you're the seller, and they make sure it's all done 100% legally. They make sure there's no outstanding liens, outstanding permits, any illegal construction, and they pretty much verify that the property is legal to sell, and they make sure that whoever ends up owning it next is in fact the next legal owner of the property. So they are a very important step in the home buying process. And one of the very last people that comes along in the transaction, and I wish it wasn't this late in the transaction, this is something that totally needs to be fixed in the real estate business because it's totally backwards. But the next person that comes along is the property appraiser. And this only applies if you are financing and you're getting a mortgage. If you're paying cash for a house, you're not going to have an appraiser unless you choose to hire one. But if you are financing, your bank or your lender is going to require that you get an appraisal done on the property. And the reason why is because they want to make sure that the house is actually worth what you're offering to pay for it. That way they're not lending you money on a house that's overvalued and is actually worth a lot less than what you are agreeing to pay for the place. And the reason why the property appraisal should happen much earlier in the transaction is for one main reason, because if the property appraisal doesn't come through to the amount, let's say you're buying a house for $300,000 and the house gets appraised for $250,000, there's a $50,000 gap. And when that situation comes along, you have two choices as the buyers or the seller. You can either renegotiate the price somewhere in the middle usually and try to make both parties happy, or a lot of times the seller will be like, well, I don't care, I want $300,000 for the house. If you want to buy it, you're going to have to come up with the extra money. I have been in situations where the buyers actually did come up with extra money, in situations where the appraisal was a little short. It's not too common. A lot of times the buyers don't have the extra money, but if they do and they really want the house, they may end up paying extra for the property in a situation like that. But the reason why this should happen sooner is because a lot of times that's what would make the deal fall apart, is the appraisal. So it just makes a lot more sense for the appraisal to be done way earlier and at the beginning of the transaction. But when it usually happens is just like a week or two before the closing is supposed to happen, and by that time the buyer has already paid for the inspection and spent several $100s on that, and has gone through their entire loan application, probably paid for a condo application fee as well. So it's just a lot of time and money wasted for the buyer mainly. So if the appraisal doesn't come through and it makes the whole deal fall apart, all this time and money was wasted for nothing. Now, the only other person that I can think of that could come along once in a while, they're not very common to be in the transaction, but on rare occasions, your lender may also require the property to have a survey done, and that will also be one of the last things that come along. And the surveyor's job is to make sure that the property lines match up with the tax rolls, and to make sure that you are in fact buying the right amount of property and the right amount of property is going to be transferred to you at closing. So you get to the closing table and you're at the end of the transaction, and this is when you're actually going to be dealing with the title company face to face, because if you are selling the house, you're going to go to the title company and you're going to be signing all your closing documents. Similarly, if you're the buyer, it's the same process for you. You're going to be going to the title company, signing all the closing documents and your mortgage documents if you're financing. And this is the last step in the process, and is basically the process that solidifies the sale. It makes it complete. Everybody gets their money. The seller gets the money in their bank account. If you're the buyer, that's the day your bank account gets drained, and that's the end. You're done. So those are all of the players who are involved in the real estate transaction. So it is a decent group of people. It's not like it's just a couple people. There are more than just a couple people involved. And I wanted to kind of just break this down for you guys out there who are new to this process and were kind of wondering how this works, and now you know. So if you enjoyed this video today and you found it helpful, go ahead and check out some of my other real estate videos right over here, because I'm sure you will find those helpful as well. And I will see you guys over there in the next one.